Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to L2 Construction Series. I'm Chong Wei from WCW Consulting. The L2 hosts are still on vacation and I'm honored to be asked to do the opening today for our Dr. Naseem. Dr. Naseem is extremely passionate about this topic and I don't think I require to introduce Dr. Naseem. Dr. Naseem is very knowledgeable and experienced in the construction law and dispute resolutions. So without further ado, and I hand over to Dr. Naseem for his presentation and enjoy this session. Dr. Naseem.
Thanks, Chong Wei. Can you just confirm that you can hear me nice and clear?
Nice and clear.
Okay, thank you. Right, thanks, Chong Wei. And just in case some of you are new to these series, over the past 30 days or so, Leong Hong Kit and Lam Wai Lun had been organizing this L2 series, as they call it, L for Lam and L for Leong. And Chong Wei was amongst the prominent speakers. And if you had heard him, you can always hear him anywhere in the videos, which is in the L2 series. Right, today we'll start with greetings. I noticed one of you had put up a kia ora greeting, which is obviously from New Zealand, or salams, or salaam alaikum if you're Muslim, and good day if you're Australian, good morning, afternoon, evening, and so on, depending on where you are from around the world. I understand there are people who have registered from 18 different countries, ranging from the UK down to the Antipodes, which is New Zealand. Now, again, I keep repeating this every day because it's important. There could be new people who have just come in and joined us and so on. And that is health and safety, house rules, emergencies. Now, we must be aware of where our emergencies are, exits are. For instance, in my case, it is on the right here. I just open the door, I run out. Oh, sorry, I have to bring the family along and tell them to get out as well. Down the stairs, out through the main door, down the shared driveway, to the main road, and we'll be safe. Probably I might bring along with me my Whittaker's chocolate. Oh, you can't see that. Never mind. Anyway, I've got a Whittaker's chocolate here for emergency in case I can't get back into the house. And of course, we've got COVID-19 as another sort of disaster happening around the world. So we know the drills again. Your face is sacred. Don't touch your face. Don't touch your eyes, don't touch your nose or your mouth, unless your hands are clean. And keep your hands clean throughout the day. And remember, physical distancing. I know the whole world calls it social distancing, but remember this series focuses on plain language. So the appropriate word is actually physical distancing, not social distancing. And the whole series, these 5-day series, is basically structured into a series of if you want some sort of a cliche, forming. Today, forming contracts, which we did on first day and so on. Performing, issues relating to contract administration and so on. Storming, that is issues relating to dispute resolution, that will be on Friday. And reforming, that will also be on Friday. And norming, what happens after 2030? I'll share about the Vision 2030 again, and we'll recap that. Now, as a reminder, Vision 2030 is for every construction contract, smart or otherwise, has got a structure and a writing style, a plain language style, that the parties to the contract, such as the client and the contractor, or a contractor and subcontractor, and the person who administers it, the contract administrator, engineer, superintendent, superintending officer, architect, whatever you call them, and secondary users like dispute resolvers, including arbitrators, mediators, adjudicators, and so on, and judges, can understand clearly and easily. So that's the vision, Vision 2030. Steps towards Vision 2030, a key step is the preparation of a white paper, which I'm writing now, which will have within it a set of modern legal drafting guidelines specifically for construction contracts, so that the construction industry can be guided to redrafting or drafting new construction contracts as we move towards Vision 2030. Okay, I just want to say a quick few words because I know that we've got people from around the world, but not everybody might know this. Even people from Malaysia might not be aware of this. Now, it is apparently important that we must have a dream, like I have a dream. In my case, yep, I have a dream that by 2030, all construction contracts in the world will be written or rewritten in plain language. Okay, fine. Dream is fine. The problem with dreams is sometimes you might wake up and it just goes poof. Okay, they also say that hard work is important. Now, yes, you can work very, very hard, but hard work alone is just time passing by. So if you work hard, it's just time passing by, one day after the other and so on. If you dream, yeah, it's good, it's important, but you might wake up and goes puff. So what we need to have is dream plus hard work. Now that combination, if you combine the two, there is a single word to mean a combination of that. This was actually shared with me and a whole bunch of professional body leaders and corporate leaders and senior government officials and so on, many, many years ago. I can't even remember how many years ago, but it's definitely more than 20 years ago. It was during the Malaysian Prime Minister, who was then Mahathir Mohamad, in the first round, when he was Prime Minister then. He had instructed that corporate leaders, professional bodies, I was then the Secretary General of the Royal Institution of Surveyors Malaysia, and I attended that session. And this was a video that he showed. I cannot forget it. He showed us dream plus hard work, basically, is what you get, and that is vision. Okay? Now, so dream alone, not good enough. Hard work alone, not good enough. When you combine the two, you get vision. Okay, let's look. Now, the other thing that I've learned, so I've learned something from the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, 2 rounds, about the importance of vision. I've also learned from Anthony Robbins, who is one of the most famous motivational speakers in the world. And yes, we did walk on fire and all that during his 4-day seminar and so on. Now, he suggests when you have a vision, you got to break it down. You start with what? I've got my vision. Okay, I've got the what. Then the next question he says is not the how. The how is easy. How do you achieve the vision is easy. The critical thing before the how is why. Why is it necessary? Now, in this case, why is Vision 2030 a necessity actually? The reason is because smart contracts are inevitable. They're here. They will come. All construction contracts, probably by 2030, will be smart contracts. The thing is, before you can develop a smart contract, before you can code into smart contracts, which I'll talk about a little bit more on Friday, you cannot be coding a contract which has got clauses or sentences which are 159 words long. Either the computer will go berserk or the person who is coding would be coding it wrongly. How can you understand a 159 word sentence, which I demonstrated in day 1 and to a certain extent day 2 as well? So you can't even code it. So it's a necessity, is necessary that construction contracts must be in plain language. By definition, that means an average words of about 20 sentences and so on, before you can develop codes and develop smart contracts. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, in the end, the world, the future of the world, the competition amongst the countries is all about productivity, productivity, productivity. Now, to increase productivity, if the contracts were written in language that people can understand, that increases efficiency and productivity. The other is, if you stop quibbling over peripheral arguments, over terminology and words which have got multiple meanings and convoluted sentences and so on, we can focus on productivity and producing the construction works on site, rather than arguing in court or arbitration or mediation or adjudication or whatever about the meanings of words. So that's the why. The third step is how. How to do it. That's the easy part, apparently. Now, here is the how that I have decided to take the approach. A few years ago, I spoke at the AIAC, Asian International Arbitration Center in Kuala Lumpur. I think it was April or maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I explained about the importance of plain language. And immediately after that, in August, comes out the AIAC contract then. And it completely ignored all my advice about plain language drafting. I can understand because it's not easy to rewrite or learn a new language called plain language. So it takes time. So my mistake was expecting people to change overnight. So I've changed my stance now. I'm suggesting to rewrite or write or pick up this new language called plain language is going to take 10 years. So we're giving it 10 years. So to do that, I'm coming out with a white paper, which will have in it the drafting guidelines, the plain language drafting guidelines, based on international standards, consistent around the whole world. And we add to it a dose of empirical evidence, because academics insist that you must have empirical evidence, do a survey, who likes what, and so on. And then just do it, just rewrite it. I'll say that it's not desperately difficult to rewrite. It's just that you got to learn this new language called plain language. That's it. There are lots of resources. And then the when. So we've got the what, we've got the why, we've got the how, and then the when. When? 2030. Let's move on. You may recall on day one, I talked about formation of contracts, the plain language drafting principles, and so on. And then day two, yesterday, we talked about the time issues. So remember, the structure of the contract is such that in day one, gives you an overview. Day two, we're zooming in on all the time clauses. And day three today, I understand there was a money, money, money song earlier, right? There you go. It's all about money today, okay? Talk mainly on payment, non-payment, and to a certain extent, some of the other provisions like insurance and bonds and so on. As a reminder, tomorrow, we'll be looking at all the quality issues, subcontracting and termination, those three broad categories. And on Friday, we'll be looking at dispute resolution, storming, comparison between arbitration, adjudication, mediation. We will also look a little bit about contract reforms and the advent of smart contracts and continuing education. One of you asked a question about, oh, I want to do a master's and I want to be a lecturer, whatever. So we'll discuss a little bit about that on Friday. Now, I just want to quickly recap and to share with you the findings so far. Remember, empirical evidence is important. The polls from the first day shows on the left, you can see on the left here, the poll shows that out of about 300 over people who did the poll at the end of the session, although we had 460 people then, but 300 or 11 people responded. The question was, do you prefer construction contracts to be in plain language or traditional language? 97% said they prefer plain language. And then if it were to be rewritten, by when? Some of you in a hurry, 25% say, oh, by 2020, that's this year. Some of you said, give it 5 years, 47%. So 3/4 think that between now and 2025, we achieve that. And a few, who are a little bit more comfortable, giving it a longer time, 30% said by 2030. Now, yesterday, the same poll was held. This time, there's a little bit more options. By 2020, 14%. By 2022, 32%. When you combine that, you're basically getting about 45%. Nearly half think that by 2022, we should have plain language construction contracts. Okay? And by 2025, another 37%. In other words, more than 80% think that by 2025, in other words, 5 years, it's got to be done. Perhaps by 2030, we should be looking at smart contracts and so on. Okay, now, as I said, feel free to ask questions relating to today's session or yesterday's session or even the day before about time issues, about financial issues, about contract formation and so on, and ask on the chat function. It will all be downloaded. The tech moderator, Daniel, is doing that. And I will also download the final chat at the end. Now, so when you ask the questions today, I'll respond to it in the first thing. Now, today, I want to respond to questions from day 2, yesterday. Now, not all these were questions from the audience. I've also thrown in a few other questions which are topical, which came about today in the newspaper, in New Zealand Herald, for instance. They're talking about the New Zealand government said we're going for elimination, and there was a little bit of a confusion. What do you mean by elimination? Now, and then it was clarified. Apparently, elimination means a reduction to 0 of the incidence of infection caused by the coronavirus. Okay, whereas eradication means permanent reduction to 0. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because when we look at practical completion yesterday, practical completion is not the same as perfect completion. Practical completion by legal definition means work is substantially completed, even if there are minor defects or a little bit of outstanding works which might need to be completed. Okay, so I repeat, in the same way as with the coronavirus, when we talk about elimination as opposed to eradication, practical completion means different from perfect completion. Practical completion by law, as defined through case law, and in the contract that we're using as a reference, it is expressly defined in the contract. It means where work is substantially complete, sufficient for it to be used for the purposes intended, even if there are a little bit of minor defects, which will not cause major disruption when it's being rectified. Okay, I'll give you an example. If, say, the whole building is complete and there's a bit of skirting which is not brilliant, you can give practical completion because that can be rectified without major disruption. Okay. Now, and still on a few more questions that I've picked up between yesterday and today, some of these actually answer some of the question. It's been suggested that because construction is complex, the language must be complex. Look, and some people think that legalese is precise, and words like reasonable, substantial, and satisfactory, need to be used. Now the answer is, and the next one, that words like reasonable. Now the response is this: words like reasonable are purposely, are intentionally, are deliberately used when the exact boundaries cannot be predefined. Okay, or defining them precisely 14 days cannot be done because the circumstances for each contract or each fax as it arises is going to vary. So you cannot say, all instructions from the architect or contract administrator must be complied within 7 days. There you go. Nice, precise. Really? Okay, here's an example. 40-story building. The whole of the toilet tiles were defective. Okay, defective. It's got to be rectified. Can't, because it's a defective material and so on. So there you go. All the 40 stories, every toilet and every floor, the contractor is going to rectify within 7 days. You're looking at impossible obligations, and you're looking at trying to be so precise, trying to avoid the word reasonable or substantial, satisfactory, and so on, to the point that it's an impossible obligation. So the reason why construction contracts, all construction contracts, I would suggest all, I don't think it's nearly all, pretty much all, if not all construction contracts, continue to use some terms of art or some phrases which are deliberately not vague, but deliberately used to because you cannot clearly define the boundaries. Words like reasonable. Okay, and I'll come to your questions in a minute, because some of you asked about the use of the word timely in the contract that I've been referring to. Okay, now the other thing is this: there is scientific evidence to show that the real efficiency gained in terms of efficiency and therefore effectiveness of a contract comes from the plain English contract being easier to read and understand, not the drafting, because the drafting might take long because it's, well, if you're not used to drafting in plain language, it might take long. No, that's not where the efficiency comes in. The efficiency comes in the implementation, in the use of it. The drafting is only a small stage. The implementation, especially if it's a standard form, is throughout. So there you go. Of the respondents, 96% with legal training and 100% of those without legal training identified it being easier to read and so on. Okay. And they gave the reason. The reason was because the spacing was good, the punctuation was good, the short sentences were good, the layout and the paragraphs and the choice of words and so on. Okay, that's evidence. Question. Many lawyers, typically, they call it forms and precedents. Oh, there's 2 E's. Never mind. It shows we're human. Anyway, forms and precedents. Now, lawyers love this. Why? The answer is obvious. Hey, it saves time. It's good for the client. It's cheaper. I just use the standard form. We do that all the time, don't we? We use standard forms of building contracts, don't we? All the time. Good. I'm not saying it's bad. It's good. Well, it's only bad if you use not brilliant forms and not brilliant precedents. My question is this. It's okay to use forms and precedents. Sure, previous standard forms. Sure, use that. And then you might want to modify, maybe. My question is this. An international version of the standard terms of construction contract, the version that I'm sharing for demonstration purposes, just one contract which has been published, would an international version of that potentially become a new norm and a new precedence? I don't know. Yet to be seen. And we will observe. And meanwhile, we've got questions to answer as well, like, oh, but has it been tried and tested and so on? Now, this is the one that you can download. I know a number of you keep asking, oh, where do I download and all that? If you just, if you've registered with L2 series, the organizers will email you, not now, they'll email you links to the YouTube videos of all the 5 days. They will email you all these links and the various references that I'm giving and all that. So just register and they'll send it to you later. Meanwhile, I think even in the flyer, it's got links to it. So anyway, so, and just a reminder from first day and yesterday as well, that the plain language drafting, someone is going to ask today, if you're new here today, oh, but what do you mean by plain language? What guidelines are you talking about? I repeat, any guideline, modern legal drafting guideline from the world, if you use it, I'm a happy man. And I had extracted from the international ones about 17 or so. There are more, but I've just extracted 17 to demonstrate. Average words about 20 and so on. Okay, so they're reproduced there. And at the bottom there, you can see the link to a Society of Construction Law paper. Okay, and I want to say this. The contract that I'm using to demonstrate the various principles of construction contracts, I'm extracting from this contract because this contract complies with pretty much all the basic principles of modern legal drafting. So it makes it easier for us to concentrate on the choice of, rather than worrying about the choice of language, we can focus on the actual technical content itself, okay? And if you recall, I mentioned the structure of the contract where all the clauses on time are clustered together, all the money clauses, quality clauses, subcontracting, termination, and dispute resolution. Remember, yesterday we did time clause, general obligations. Today we're looking at the financials. Tomorrow we'll look at the quality, subcontracting, and termination. And then we look at dispute resolution on Friday. And some of you asked for references. I said, this is like a dictionary of modern legal usage. Maybe you don't need to get this. It's a bit expensive as well. But a very, very good book is Professor Peter Butt from Sydney Law School in Australia, whose book, Modern Legal Drafting, is a really, really good book. I like it because it's got lots of cases in it, court cases, which backs me up because I'm not a lawyer. So it backs me up whenever I need to refer to cases and so on. Judge Mark Painter's 40 Rules of Legal Drafting is also really good. That's for a quick, when you're waiting in the shopping mall for maybe your family to go in and buy shopping or whatever. Yeah, you can read the whole book in a day, no questions. 40 Rules of Legal Drafting. Judge Mark Painter, a former United Nations Court of Appeal judge. There's, of course, others. Mark Adler's book and Michelle Asprey from Australia and so on, okay? And I just want to remind us again, why is this important? Because as a professional, lawyers, it's incumbent upon all lawyers, architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, any professional, that you put client's interest before self-interest, and drafting a contract in language that the clients and the contractor and the subcontractor and the sub-subcontractor and the suppliers can understand is a sign of altruism. And professionals and commercial demands suggest that in future, certainly by 2030, clients will refuse to pay for legal services unless they are plain. Now, I'm now going to share with you the day 2 questions in another document. And I am assuming you can see this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it slightly bigger as well. Okay, now, just very quickly. Yesterday, someone privately asked Tech Moderator, please award an e-certificate to all participants. It will be rewarding. Basically, that just means so they can get the CPD, Continuing Professional Development Brownie points. I'll check with the organizers whether it's possible. Anyway, if it is, then they will send to you. Good morning from Rwanda. The reason I put that is, I mean, welcome. I mean, we're getting people from all over the place. And Kiara from Aotearoa, obviously that's from New Zealand. And there's someone here. Who is this? Juita, right? Signing in at 15:05, understanding principles. And then there's Amna Saleh, one of my, these are all my, well, one is a current colleague. Juita is a fellow lecturer at Massey University. And Amna is a former colleague in Malaysia. And they're all signing in. The reason why they're doing this, folks, if you don't mind, is because they want to show evidence to the professional body, Royal Institution of Surveyors Malaysia, that they have attended the session because they won that 1 hour CPD point. Honkit and I discussed this. We think that you should be here for the knowledge. Forget about the CPD point. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Now, Barry Cooper Cook, I already told Monty hi. So, and I noticed that you said bye at 4:04 yesterday. So I haven't got a reply from Monty yet, but if he does say hi, I'll say hi to you later on. Oh, this is just a little bit of a chat. Oh yes, Whitaker's is good and so on. I just want to highlight that one of you is doing a PhD in some, from India, from IIT, I might add, and he might well post this link. And if you've got time, download the link and do the survey. Okay, now the tech moderator has provided all the links, but he will also provide it later. And I now want to deal with questions, serious questions. One, sir, I haven't been knighted, but anyway, some people call me sir, that's okay. Have you come across cases where parties have approached court only because of ambiguous terms in contract? The answer is every day. The answer is absolutely every day. Parties are in court arguing on peripheral issues rather than how much the contractor should be paid. Every day, every day. They argue about the meaning of the word shall. They argue about the meaning of the word reasonable, of course, you know, but that's okay. You can establish through the facts of the case. So every day they argue about the meaning of the word regularly and diligently. And unfortunately, now I'm highlighting something here. Unfortunately, and I think the latest edition might have corrected it, I'm not sure, but in the PAM contract, the architect's contract, the contract that's used most commonly in Malaysia in the private sector, probably 80%, 90% of the private sector would use it. The word is the contractor must proceed with the works regularly and diligently. There is case law defining the meaning of the word regularly and diligently. That was in the JCT contract. That was in the PAM 69 contract. That was in the, I'm pretty certain, the 1998 contract. But I think in the later edition, 2006 edition, the word is the contractor must proceed with the works regularly and stroke or diligently. That is different from regularly and diligently, because the courts have construed regularly and diligently to be read as a composite phrase. Okay, now PAM's version, certainly the 2006 version, has said regularly and stroke or diligently, which means if you fail on regularity, you can be terminated or okay, yeah, you can be terminated. If you fail on being diligent, you can be terminated. And a combination of both, you can be terminated as well. That legal meaning is different from the original JCT, the original PAM contract, and the original court case, which define the meaning of the word regularly and diligently. Okay? If somebody is here from PAM, please highlight this to Stephen or whoever, you know, who is the chair of the drafting committee, or maybe the PAM president, and they can follow up on this. Okay, let's look at the second question. PAM, again, lots of people asking about the architect's contract, stating conditions precedent in extension of time and loss and expense. Do you think there's an important condition? Okay, yeah, okay. Basically, the question is this, I'll paraphrase it. The question is this. The contract says that there are certain prerequisites that you must comply before you get extension of time, or before you can claim for loss and expense. Do you think it's an important ingredient? I think it is. I think it is. Why? Well, you don't want someone, suddenly out of the blues, I want, project's nearly finished, and you say, excuse me, I want extension of time. For what? 8 months ago, there was a bit of a late drawing for the foundations. Oh my goodness. Nah, that's bad. That's bad because it doesn't give an opportunity for the architect or engineer or the consultants or the client to mitigate their loss, to mitigate the delay. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. Let's move on. Oh, okay. Thanks a lot, Naseem. I like the format of the certificate you've drafted. Now, yesterday, I showed a template, a pro forma template, which is in that contract, which I'll share in a minute. And it's got lots of pro forma. And it's good to know that at least some of you think you love the format and it's so simple and easy to fill and to understand. Brilliant. I appreciate feedback. I need to know that it's good or bad. And if it can be improved, why not? Okay. Question 4. During LD is liquidated damages. Yeah. During liquidated damage period, can not the client request contractor to do some other works? Answer is, look, when it comes to liquidated damage period, it just means the contractor has been late. Okay. Say the original completion date is 30th of December, and it is now February. Okay, and say the consultant, the architect or contract administrator decided, oh, Mr. Contractor, you should have finished. You're now in a period of what is called, it's an English word, culpable delay. That means delay caused by the contractor's own fault. That is the reason for the delay. Fine. Now the question is, can the client request contractor to do some other works? The answer is the contract is still existing. The work hasn't been completed. Yeah, under most construction contracts, I would suggest sensible construction contracts. Of course, the client can ask you to do some more work, variation work, for instance. Why? Why? Because if the contractor is in a delay period, and oh my God, only at the last minute you realize the chandelier that's going to be fixed. Oh dear, only now we realize, oh, maybe a more appropriate one is better and so on. Are you going to deprive the client of the right to vary the work at that point? When in the first place, if you had completed on time, you would have been done within the time anyway. So yeah, fine, no worries. I've got no problems with it. Of course, it depends on what the contract says, but I would suggest under normal circumstances, it's good to allow the client or the contract administrator to issue instructions even during a delay period. What happens with the dates of signature of each party is different. Yeah, interesting question. Right. Now, in the contract that, that we have here, I'll share it with you in a minute. In this contract, we've got the date that the parties sign and so on. Now that's just a signature of when you that's just the date of when you signed the contract. When the contract was formed need not necessarily be the date that party A or party B signs. Okay, the contract may well have been formed when the contractor submits a tender and the client says, right, we'll have you. Example, they may have issued a letter of acceptance, for instance, or letter of award. That's fine. The contract has been signed, but the contract has been formed, and that is the date the contract was actually entered into. Okay, so anyway, that's one way of looking at it. Typically, that's how it would be because people take a long time to prepare the contract documents. Now, however, assuming that the day the whole contract is all ready for it to be signed because you're very efficient, you don't need letter of award and everything, it is all nice and ready. So sometimes it might be that the day that the second party signs, and typically you wouldn't do it within a day or two anyway, but whatever it is, because if the whole contract hasn't been entered into yet, there's no contract yet, then surely it's when the second party signs that the contract is formed. Assuming like a normal piece of paper. Let's say I've just come up with a contract. Okay, I've just come up with a piece of paper here. The contract is there. One party is offered or signed. That's only an offer, isn't it? So only when the second party, typically when you want a tenancy contract or sale and purchase agreement, the agent comes from, oh, Mr. Naseem, I've got a tenancy for you here. Would you like to sign? Only when the second person signs, it comes to effect. So I would suggest that do look at the second signatures, probably, assuming contract hasn't been signed. Is there data to show how many plain contracts are now in use? Well, in the first place, which ones are the plain language contracts? Not many. PAM is not, JCT is not, SIA Singapore contract is not, the Hong Kong one is not, the one in India, CPWD is not, the one in, well, when I say not means, there are varying degrees of compliance as to whether they're plain language or not. But all those contracts that I mentioned, even the New Zealand Standards 3910, which is good, but not entirely a plain language one, because the New Zealand contract, for instance, I know a number of you are from New Zealand, so I'll share this with you. The parliamentary drafting guidelines in New Zealand has got a set of recommended drafting guidelines. They are brilliant. All acts of parliament comply with it. But the New Zealand standard contract, the most commonly used contract, doesn't comply with that recommended drafting guide that the Parliamentary Drafting Council Office itself uses. For instance, the word shall. There are 700, sorry, the new edition, 2013, has got 900 shells in it. Whereas if you look at legislation in New Zealand, there are no shells at all. Legislation in New South Wales, no shell. Queensland, no shell. Victoria, no shell. Because there are reasons for it. Because one word with multiple meaning is bad drafting. That's it. Okay. Now, so coming back then, maybe we could look at how many the STCC has been in use. The answer is, from what I understand from CIDB, 10,800 hard copies have been circulated over the years. Between 2015 and now, 10,800, but there's a whole bunch of contracts which have been downloaded. So unless somebody does tracking and so on, I know that organizations and consultancies that I've been associated with have used it and are still using it in Malaysia. Some of it in modified form for a design build, for instance, the Putrajaya pedestrian bridge. There was a high-rise office block. And then there was residential, and I know my student has used it on a project in a restaurant, big, more than $1 million restaurant renovation. Happens to be Papa Rich, which is in Auckland, India. Okay, so is it tested in court? Any data on this? Oh my goodness. Okay, I must respond to this. Tried and tested. Has this contract been tried and tested? The answer is, what does tried and tested mean? Tried means it's been used. Tested means it's been tested. What? Ideally in court. The JCT contract is a heavily tried and tested contract. And what do judges say about testing it? When they tested it, they say it's a farrago of obscurities. I repeat, a farrago of obscurities. My goodness. So that's not a compliment, is it? So I'm not aware of this contract ever being tested in court. But has it been used? Yes. Has it been tried? Yes. But tested in court? No. A brilliant contract perhaps should never be tested in court. Okay. Oh, what do you refer with multiple cross-referencing? And one of you actually attempted to reply, and I agree with that. Cross-referencing means one way, refer to appendix, refer to appendix, refer to appendix. The other is multiple cross-referencing. That is subject always to clause 24, and then we look at 24, subject always to clause 36, and so on. So the subject always all over the place is what I have objections to. That shouldn't happen. Okay, or you try and minimize it. I think they've used PAM for decades and may not want to alter it. Tough. By 2030, PAM will be in plain language. It will not be in the current language. I tell you what, if I'm challenged, and I've spoken to PAM presidents as well. They did say put in a proposal to the Architects Association in Malaysia. I just haven't had time. But if really the Architects Association is serious, I'm happy to work with them. I'll concentrate on the drafting style, the language, but of course PAM will decide on policies. Okay? Now, lump sum with quantities, isn't it a deviation schedule? I'm not sure what the deviation schedule is, but you can have a pure lump sum contract, you can have a lump sum with quantities contract. Both are fine. Article 345, proof to fill in the name. Oh, okay, so the name of the contract administrator or the architect or whatever. Yes, you do fill in the name. And there's a related question here. Should it be, do you put in the name of a person or the office? Look, if somebody is going to be physically signing something, just like I'm a qualified architect, if I'm signing and certifying practical completion or I'm a QS, signing my life away with a certain registration licenses and so on, then put in your name. You are the one who is signing the certification and so on. What do you mean by timely? I already responded earlier when we say reasonable time, timely and so on. It will depend on the facts of the case. So a timely period for you to rectify a 40-story building, to rectify every floor's tiling on every floor is not going to be 1 week. I don't know whether it'll be 1 month. It'll depend on the facts of the case, and that will depend on case by case. So it's okay to use the word timely. Don't ask me to put a precise 7 days because I already explained that. A given variation clause, one of the most detailed and frequently referred to in the contract, is such a brief variation clause sufficient. When I come back to the clause, I'll look at it. Now, see, in the absence of words to the contrary, one party cannot unilaterally on their own vary the contract. That's why variation clauses are important. Most Commonwealth countries, derivatives of the JCT contracts, have got a separate variation clause where it refers to the addition, omission, substitution of the quality or the quantity of the works. That's all. In New Zealand, peculiarly, everything is called variation. Not just physical variation to the work, the quality, the quantity, and so on. Everything. Everything is lumped under variation. Hence, a very long variation clause. In other jurisdictions, particularly those coming from the UK, derivatives of it, including Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Sri Lanka, and so on, what they do is, when it comes to variation, we're talking about the quality, quantity, scope, and so on. And then when it comes to extension of time, you have a separate provision. When it comes to loss and expense, you have a separate provision. Okay, so I like that structure rather than everything dumped and called variation. Now, the question still is, this contract, just 3 clauses, defines it generically. Okay, now, as long as it empowers the client to change his or her mind, that's okay. It is powerful enough to cover it. When we come back to the contract itself, we'll have a look at it in a minute. Okay, number 14. How about notice period and submission of instruction? Isn't it open-ended when you say timely manner? No. Again, the contractor must give notice of COVID in Malaysia. How many days? Is it 7 days? Is it 14 days? Is it 30 days? They keep changing every week. So what do you do? So don't restrict yourself to say, oh, you must give notice within 2 days. Don't. Leave it open. Depends on the facts of the case. We all know what's the notice period for New Zealand, given our lockdown period, and for Malaysia and so on. Love the plain language. Oh, good. It's good to know people love the plain language. But I've removed all the praises and so on. My daughter said, Papa, if someone praises you, why don't you just say thank you? Why do you have to say, oh, just ignore it or whatever? Okay, thank you, everyone, those of you who have said nice words and so on, but I haven't put it in the questions. If the contractor refuses to acknowledge receipt of the certificate, okay, right. The certificate, the pro forma says, the architect certifies, or the contract administrator certifies, and then the contractor acknowledges receiving. Even if the contractor doesn't acknowledge receipt, doesn't matter, because the authority is on the contract administrator. I've issued the practical completion. I've issued it. Fine, Mr. Contractor. It's only for the record. It's nice to know you've acknowledged it. That's all. Fine. You don't need that. Okay. If the contractor refuses to acknowledge, oh yeah, same question, similar question, different people. Actually, why would the compliance recommend to spell out in the preliminaries? Okay, I think I said yesterday, in this contract, it doesn't spell out all the acts referring to health safety, for instance. I said, if you want to guide the contractor, hey, we've got a health safety act, we've got the SOXO act, we've got the, some detailed acts that you want to highlight, go ahead. But you don't have to. Okay? You don't have to. I have a question relating to use like shall, reasonable, what do you think of it? Yeah, I've already addressed this. The PAM 2018 should be done by those industry professionals in the B40 group. What is B40? Is it below 40? Perhaps they're not so. Yes, yeah. I think in Malaysia, B40 means below 40. Okay. So the suggestion here is, I think the young people should write plain language contracts, because the old guards are so accustomed to not wanting to rock the boat and so on. Look, no matter what, I'm 55, turning 56 this year. I'm an old guard, but I'm willing to change, so old guards can change as well. Just don't sack them. Just say nicely to them why it will be good. How the terms reasonable and good industry practice are considered. Yeah, I've already dealt with this. Okay, good. Now I'm going to share with you back to the contract itself. And I will quickly now have a quick look at the question earlier where someone said, all right, 7:45. Look at this, variations. The contract administrator may issue variations to vary the contract. That's it. It's wide. It's very powerful. Okay, but it also says it's got client's prior approval, so you don't have to worry if the contractor doesn't say, "Oh, excuse me, Mr. Engineer, do you have authority to issue this?" You don't have to do that. And then, of course, the financial effect, you edit it. And we dealt with the clause on time yesterday. Let's look at the financial ones. Okay. Now, this whole thing about the financial clause of payment, my goodness, it's not at all complex. Look at 311. It says, the total price for the work is stated in A5, which we saw yesterday. Fine, a lump sum price of that. And then it says, it is, or an adjusted sum, because you may have variations, is a sum the client must pay the contractor. That's it. And guess what? What happens if you enter into a contract? Remember, historically, this was supposed to be for renovation works, but I'm suggesting that it could be used for more than renovation works. But anyway, or more bigger than just small projects. It says here, if the total price is not stated, the contract administrator calculates the price based on the actual work done and the rate stated in the contract. Do you remember yesterday I asked you the questions? If you have a schedule of rates contract, can you use this contract? Yes. Can you use it as a pure lump sum contract? Yes. Can you use a lump sum with quantities contract? Yes. Can you use it as a lump sum with approximate quantities or remeasurement contract for civil engineering works maybe, where you remeasure the whole thing? Yes. Yes, and yes, and yes. Okay. What happens if there are not even rates in the contract, but you've got a contract? The scope is there, everything, but oh, somebody didn't put in a schedule of rates or whatever. Even if so, the rates are not stated, then fair market rates must be used. My goodness. This is what I call extreme flexibility. Some academics use the phrase agile contracts or agile construction. And here I say, here is an agile contract. It's pretty flexible. Okay, let's move on. Indemnity and insurance. Look, insurance. If you look at the clause on insurance, it specifies the amount, okay, for third party and the contractor's all risk and so on. And it also says that the contractor must take up insurance to cover in the joint names and so on, or anything else required under law, as well as anything that is stated in this contract. Example, the client in a particular contract might have specified in the preliminary sections details, provisions for professional indemnity insurance or contractor's all risk and so on. That's all good because the whole thing is part of the contract. It's all good. Okay, so you can say that. So this is a standard form. Okay, it's versatile. So don't start putting in very specific details of exact amount and so on here. Okay, anyway, and performance guarantee insurance retention. Okay, now the way this contract is drafted, remember this is a policy issue here. It's not necessarily for me to decide exactly what policies should govern this contract, because the policy committee comprised a number of people. I was in that policy committee and I had my say as well, but the drafting of it is what I'm focused on, because this is what I wrote based on the policy directions. Okay, let's look at this now. So there's a retention sum regime, or you can have a performance guarantee or a performance bond. In this case, performance guarantee insurance in a form approved by the contract administrator, which means that if you insist on a bank bond, you provide the template for the bank bond. If you don't mind insurance bond, you can have that. If you don't mind a parent guarantee bond, that's fine as well. So it's extremely flexible, okay? And it says as well, hey, excuse me, if you don't provide the performance bond, then by default, you're opting for a retention sum, okay? 10% is a default because that's what the policy committee wanted, which is fine. Oh, now let's look at the advance payment provision. If this contract provides for an advance paying to be paid by the client, and if it is, if under A13, you just fill in the blanks, advance payment amount. If you do not fill in, the default provision is there is no advance payment, done. Okay, right. And then it goes on to say payment claims and payment certificates are based on actual work value unless there is a stage payment. My word, this contract can provide for stage payment as well. If there's stage payment, you attach in the appendices and you actually state in what documents form the contract, you list down stage payment schedule. Immediately that forms part of the contract and that becomes the basis for payment. If not, it's based on the base is actual work value. Wow, so short, shocking. It's scary that it can be so short. And look at the sentence length. They are averaging about 19 words per sentence. I know I did an analysis of that, but this one, for instance, you know how many words is it? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, about 25. So there are some sentences which are 25, some sentences which are 16. average is about 20. Judge Mark Painter's requirement is about 18, and this particular contract is about 19 or so, which is fine. And then it goes on to say, okay, submit a payment claim, and then contract administrator assesses it and prepares a payment certificate within 7 days of receiving the payment claim. And now, question, what is included in it? And it says here, what are the items to be included? It says cumulative value of work properly done and so on. Based on stages if specified. If not, if you don't have stage payment, then cumulative value of work properly done. Okay, value based on contract rates, and if non-stated, based on fair market rates. There you go. I mean, that's the first item. A normal thing that any QS would be able to do. Cumulative value of work done, cumulative value of work done by subcontractors, again, based on contract rates, if none, then fair market rate, and so on. Okay. And it includes an amount for managing the subcontractors. Do you know what we call profit in attendance? Yeah, there you go. It's there. And then the net value of varied works. Okay. Again, just in case there are not contract rates for variation, varied rates, then based on fair market rates. And then unfixed materials at a percentage stated in A15. And if you don't state, there's a default provision. I think it's 75% or something. Compensation for direct financial loss and expense incurred by the contractor following a breach by the by the client, and following suspension. So there's a provision for suspension, so you can add the compensation for direct financial, and including following financial compensation following valid termination of the contractor's employment. Okay, where the contractor himself has said, hey, look, I'm going to terminate my own employment. Okay, and then what do you deduct? Payment made under the advance payment, cumulative value of work previously certified, financial compensation for liquidated damage. In other words, the liquidated damage amount is provided in the contract itself, a little bit like some government contracts like the Malaysian Public Works Department, where the contract administrator himself puts in the amount. Okay, this is the amount to be deducted. Of course, the client can waive that, and if the client waives that, issues an instruction and says, okay, yeah, don't deduct liquidated damage. Adjustment in the value of work following a breach that the contract administrators instructs not to be rectified. I just want to mention this briefly. I'll be talking about the quality clause tomorrow, Thursday, but I'll just mention this. This contract recognizes the practicality of a breach having happened. That means the work is defective. The whole building, let's exaggerate a bit, yeah? The whole building is out by, 1 meter, or it's like saying it, that means slanted by 4 degrees, okay? No problem with the authorities' approval, no problem, it's all within the site, there's enough space and everything else for car parks and all that. It's just that a little bit, out of alignment. Or it is maybe the setting off is slightly out by 1 meter or so. No problems, authorities are saying it's all fine. But that's a breach, right? A breach is a breach, technically it's a breach. What is the compensation that the client is entitled to get? Answer, yeah, Mr. Contractor, demolish the 40-story building. Please build it according to the contract. Wow. Now, instead of that, let's be practical about it. Why not? The contractor compensates the client for the fact that maybe one of the rooms is slightly smaller, or the whole building is slightly out, or it's slightly slanted, or maybe the angle is not brilliant, which means the feng shui might not be right. Chinese are always fussed about the feng shui, with a bit of corrections and so on. And what do? You adjust the value of the work completed following a breach that the contract administrator instructs is not to be rectified. So in other words, the contract administrator says, look, don't rectify that. I will adjust the value of the defective work. Now, normally contracts call it diminution in the value of the works. Okay, but I don't want to say diminution because it could be adjustment, could be increased as well. And that actually did happen for the construction court renovation works in Kuala Lumpur and in Shah Alam in Malaysia, where they used this contract. And the architect was a former president for one of the projects, okay, of PAM. You ask him how he found this contract, no worries. Okay, let's move on. Compensation for financial loss and expense following a breach by the contractor. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, contractor has been in breach and you recover compensation for loss and expense. Compensation following valid termination. Okay, so there you go. Retention sum, of course you deduct the retention sum, 10% the cumulative value of the work subject to the limit. So there's a limit of retention sum. It's like a normal contract, a very common style. And the net amount due is whatever it is that you must pay. And then final payment certificate, and hang on. Yeah. Okay, so let's just go down. Yeah, okay. So final payment certificate and release. So within, now, having done all the net amount due and so on, at the end of everything, the clause, this particular contract says within 30 days after final completion certificate. Now, many contracts call this certificate of making good defects, which is absolute the final thing. Okay, whereas here it says final completion certificate when all the defects, instead of calling it certificate of making good defects, it just calls it final completion certificate, which is a different, slightly different terminology, but so what? The contract administrators must finalize the accounts and release any retention and issue a final payment certificate. The client must pay, or vice versa, because it might be that the contractor might owe the client the net amount due stated in the final, not later than the date stated. Now that is all there is to the payment clause. Now, I want to just quickly look at the template, the pro forma template, which is here. By the way, the pro formas that we have, we've got letter of award, contract administrator's instruction, which we looked at yesterday, advance payment, payment certificate, and final payment certificate. These are the three we're going to be looking at, right? Because yesterday we looked at the adjustment of time certificate, practical completion certificate, final completion, non-completion. Today, we'll be looking at CNAR 03, is just a reference anyway. Payment certificate, advance payment certificate, the normal ones, and final payment certificate. That's all. Let's look at the template and see if it works. Okay. By the way, why do we have a letter of award when yesterday I said you don't need letter of award? Only because CIDB said, Naseem, but the whole industry uses letter of award. So I said, okay, if you want, but I'm not going to put much in it. So I'm just saying here, I'm writing to inform you the client has decided to award the contract for the above to you. The contract documents will be signed and being prepared. Meanwhile, the contract sum is this, date for starting is this, date for completion. It doesn't say anything. You don't need this, but you can have it if you want. But I don't want any conflict between this letter of award, letter of acceptance, and what's in the contract itself. Okay, and you just issue it and so on. By the way, the reason I've written like this, I'm writing to inform you the client has decided to award the contract to you. Why? There is case law in UK where an architect said, "We're pleased to award this contract to you." The court said, "Oh," and the client didn't want the contract to enter into a contract. The court said, yeah, the client is perfectly entitled to. Why? There's no contract between the client and the contractor. There's only a contract between the architect and the contractor, believe it or not. So this is carefully worded so that you avoid all that. Contract administrator's instruction. Here's my instruction under the clause. That's all. Now here's payment certificate, advance payment certificate. I certify the sum of whatever it is to be paid by the client to the contractor as in advance. The client must pay not later than the time stated in the within X number of days. That's advance payment. Let's look at the payment certificate itself. Oops. Okay. This is the payment certificate. Reference, contract for. I certify the net amount due under clause B353, the one that we just saw just now, as follows. Total additions, total deductions, net amount due. Done. The client must pay the contractor this not later than the time stated. You sign. The client acknowledges, because remember, you want the client to make sure that the client knows I have to pay. And, oops, sorry, I missed that. And it's copied to the contractor, right at the bottom here. Copied to the contractor. There you go. Now, sorry, I just want to show you the second page of this breakdown, because there is a breakdown. Now, that was a summary, A and B. And here's the breakdown. The breakdown is the same as what we had in the clause just now. I've checked every comma in this, every word is from the clause that we just saw. So all you have to do is fill in the amount here. Okay, it's in Ringgit Malaysia as opposed to New Zealand dollars. Hey, let's have a New Zealand version of it. Let's have an Aussie version of it. Let's have a Papua New Guinea version of it. Let's have a Chinese renminbi or whatever it is, whatever, British pounds or whatever. The words are all there, cross references there. Nobody's going to make any mistake. On a Microsoft Word document, all you have to do is just fill in the amount. Add it all up, and put it in the other one. And here's the final payment certificate. I certify the net amount due of this. It's a similar thing. The client, as follows. The client to the contractor, or the contractor to the client. Because remember, it could be that there's been the net effect is that the contractor owes the client some money. And that's the amount. Wow. End of story. Now, it is 8 o'clock. Don't go away, because I have been given permission to do two things. Because there have been quite a few of you are saying, oh, can we extend it, make it 1 hour, 15 minutes, or 1.5 and all that. Look, I can spend the whole day, or night SK, it might be, it's 8 o'clock now. But let's just try to keep to within time. I've answered all the questions from yesterday. Today's question, I will answer all of it tomorrow. And since we're finished, what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to my last slide in the, sorry, my PowerPoint slide, and I'm going to share with you, finally, for one more time, Vision 2030. And what is it again? Every construction contract, smart or otherwise, has got a structure and plain language style, like the style we just saw, that the parties to the contract administrator, and secondary users like lawyers, judges, arbitrators, everyone can understand clearly and easily. I really appreciate the feedback from so many of you who have been saying, oh, we love this and all that. I also appreciate feedback from world authorities who say this is nice and clear, it's complying with all plain language drafting guidelines and so on. To do that, a white paper is being prepared. I'll prepare it at some point. I will circulate to, I think, about 480 people or whatever have registered for this. Some of them are not here, obviously, because they've got work and so on, but that's okay. Or many of them are in America, so they will be sleeping, but it will be on a YouTube video. When my white paper is ready, I'll circulate, I'll get the organizers to circulate to everyone. If you like it, endorse it, share it with your neighbors and so on. But there is a poll today as well. The poll today will be activated by the tech moderator right now, and he will actually I can stop share now. And okay, so the question is this: should I attempt to write a set of plain language universal model terms of construction contracts? The one that I've shared with you is specific to Malaysia. It's got a Malaysian currency and all that. I'm asking you now, folks, I am prepared to do this if you think I should try to write a plain language universal model terms of construction contract, which the whole world can use from wherever you are in the world. In other words, I'll have flexible currency. I'm not going to say I'm going to copy a FIDIC or whatever. No, it will be written in plain language. So please respond to that question that I have asked, and hopefully we get a fair number of responses. It'll be nice to get all of you who are here. It's a simple yes or no. So please respond yes or no, unless you've fallen asleep. I hope you haven't. And yeah, once you have all answered a reasonable number, oh, I've got here some notes coming out. Big yes. No, but you can only vote once. Someone is saying big yes. Actually, that looks like a Kiwi yes, Y-E-S-S, yes. So once you've answered, the tech moderator will share the results on the screen so that we'll see whether I can draft. If I can draft it by next week, I might even ask Hongkit and Wailun whether we could have an add-on session, specifically maybe a 2 or 3 hour session to debate the flexibility of that contract to be used worldwide. Separate session, not tomorrow or Friday, but maybe a separate one. And the other thing that might be possible is for us to look at a subcontract, maybe with a fewer people, maybe only 100 people or so, to discuss the model terms of subcontract, which has already been published 2007 by CIDB. We can discuss that, but focus group rather than lots of people. You can watch, but we can have a oral session. So you ask questions, I answer, and we go through it two-way rather than just me speaking. With that, thank you very much. And the tech moderator will put some songs and maybe give the, oh, wow, okay, a set of plain language. 91% say yes. So are you asking me to write a contract before Friday or before the weekend or before next week? Anyway, I'll take a screenshot of the poll results so that I have it in my system. I'll think about it. Since 91% of the people say I should attempt to write a plain language universal model contract which can be used worldwide. No promises yet. I will try. With that, with me signing off in Auckland at 8:05 p.m. Wish you a pleasant evening, morning. Assalamu alaikum.